3 sets of minutes to approve, January 2nd, January 14th, and January 16th.
Only be approved as read.
Second. Do you have any discussion? Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Public communication. We have a couple of written communications. The first is a letter from Guy Morey, and he's here tonight and would like to speak in support of his letter.
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys read the letter. So I'm really questioning the applicability of the right to farm ordinance, which contains, as you know, farm-based recreational activities and agritourism. And it puts the onus on the Board of Selectmen to determine what that is and how it should be applied. There's a deep history in this that you guys know a little bit about. And I think I have some thresholds that I have to meet. The first is probably to demonstrate that we're actually engaged in agriculture. So I brought some products in that we make and sell locally online. I don't know if you want to see these. You guys want to see these?
Sure.
Yeah, so these are products that we make and sell from things that we actually grow on the farm. And there's a whole bunch of other things that we grow. I can go through a list of it if you want to. But these are for sale at J sites, they're for sale at Foreign Cargo, and they're for sale online. They will be for sale at some of the local nurseries in the springtime. So that is part of our agricultural output. I think the person that I really need to convince is Donna. That's what we're actually doing.
Who's
So Donna,
here tonight, and I just want to, because folks can't see her off camera,
Yeah.
but she definitely
so
should be part of the discussion.
Yeah, and so I don't need to prove that I'm engaged in that unless somebody wants me to. Is that something that I need to do? Because I'm trying to apply the right to farm ordinance to our farm. And so the first question is, are we actually engaged in agriculture?
I think one of the things that you have to understand is that the right to farm ordinance does not give you the right to have agritourism. The right to farm ordinance is strictly in place to keep you protected from being sued as a nuisance from your neighbor. So I know you're saying that you are going to be coming to the selectmen to make the determination, but if you read the last dispute resolution and advisory opinion, it says, in the event a dispute arises between an agricultural operator and a resident in the town of Kent as to whether a particular agricultural operation constitutes a nuisance, either interested party may substitute a written request to the selectmen for an advisory opinion or to mediate the dispute. So first of all, I am not a resident. The determination that I made was based on my position as the land use administrator. So the selectmen really have no say in here, and you can't go to them for a dispute resolution because the dispute is not between a resident and yourself. So their determination as to whether or not you can have agritourism has nothing to do with the right to farm ordinance. If you further read the right to farm ordinance, it also, in a number of places, says, provided saying do not conflict with any provision of the zoning regulations.
Right.
A commercial establishment in the rural district is still not allowed in the town of Kent.
So just to kind of take that one step at a time, agriculture is allowed in the rural zone.
Yes.
Agriculture is a commercial endeavor.
Yes. If you're a
So,
farm. But you've
if
not
you're a
been
farm.
determined that you're a farm.
So who gets to make the determination whether I'm a farm?
Well, I would think that it probably would have something to do with how you're assessed. And if you look at your assessment, you are still assessed as a single-family dwelling, and not as a farm.
I don't know why that would be.
I don't
It
think
was a
that I
farm
can
when we
answer.
bought it. It's been a farm since the beginning of time. And we've been engaged in agricultural activities the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's more of how the property is seen by the tax assessor, and less this is what we've always used the land and the property for. So I think there's terminology there that you need to follow up with.
With the tax assessor. Right, so that's-
And also probably reading the regulations about the tax assessment to be rezoned as a farm would be
So-
one step.
So farming is a use of right without permit, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter between the tax assessor and myself, why we're not listed as a farm?
Well, that would be one step in making the determination as if you are a farm or not, right?
Mhm.
But that still doesn't allow you to have special events.
Yeah, we're not talking about special events. The ordinance is, included in the ordinance is the definition of farming. And included in that is farm-based recreational activities and agritourism. It's actually included in the definition. And that is something that the zoning board passed in 2015. And that's something that then,
Zoning board didn't pass this.
what they did in 2015 was they recommended, they made their support.
They supported, and then a town ordinance was created, but it wasn't approved by the zoning board. Go ahead.
The selectmen passed it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a town ordinance now.
Right.
And included in that town ordinance is, for farming, is agritourism and farm-based recreational activities. So what I'm just trying to get at is what that means and how we can use it. I don't want to have special events, but I would like to have farm-to-tables or other kinds of gatherings.
Well, that's a special event. I mean, if I just to use as an example, the Kent Brewery. That's a recognized farm, categorized as a farm. They came to the Planning and Zoning Commission and said, we would like to have a special event. And we said, okay, well, what do you want to do? And they said that they would like to have a hop harvest. That is an agritourism event, because they were actually there helping to harvest the hops that the brewery was using to make their beer.
Right.
I don't see how what you're saying you're a farm. What are the people going to be doing there?
They're going to be consuming some of the produce that we grow on the farm. So they're going to sit down and actually consume some of it.
I still believe that what you're going to need to do is come to the commission and plead your case. I don't think it's going to go through. You're not a farm at this point in time. And basically, you need to try to change the zoning regulations, which is what we've been telling you since 2013.
I did go in 2015, and when they were rewriting them, and as you know, John told me that I was too late. So, I think that there's a stonewall there for us. I really feel like that we're getting singled out and kind of prevented from doing things. I mean, the right to farm ordinance was clearly passed. It's clearly a part of the ordinances. The zoning regulations defer to the ordinances specifically. So, yeah, no, I have it right here. I'll show you. It says, this is section 1430, which is
1430 of what?
In the new regulations.
We don't have a section 14 in our new regulations.
It's 1430.
Okay,
This is what it
1,430.
says. These regulations are not intended to repeal, abrogate, annul, or in any way impair or interfere with any existing provisions of law or ordinance. So we have an existing ordinance
Right.
that protects farm-based recreational activities. So
What it does is it agrees with the ordinance, and the ordinance is basically put together to prevent farms from having to go to court for nuisance lawsuits.
I understand that, but it
So
also
it doesn't,
defines.
and then it also says that you cannot act in any way, shape, or form that violates the zoning regulations.
So then that's the interesting question, right, that we're here before the BOS about. So if zoning has section 1430 that says that these regulations are not intended to interfere with an ordinance, and the ordinance exists, how are we in violation of any zoning regulation if the activity and the use is actually agricultural, because that is allowed. And then the ordinance goes on to define agricultural and includes farm-based recreational activities. So how are we in violation if 1430 is stated the way it is, and if agriculture is allowed in Kent, and farm-based recreational activities are defined under agricultural as included?
Right, but you also need to read the entire ordinance.
I have the entire ordinance in front of me.
And I do too, and it says in 2 different regulations that you can go ahead and operate as long as you're not in violation of the zoning regulations.
That's my question. How
And
are
so
we-
the zoning regulations
which one-
do
which
not
one?
allow,
Yeah, which one are we in violation of?
you are not allowed to have special events, commercial activities, if you're not without, special activities in a commercial zone are not allowed, and that's what you've been having.
Special-
Weddings, birthday parties, other family get-togethers, special events on your
So,
property.
I just don't, they're not special events. I mean, you can define them any way you want to, but what we're doing is saying that under the farm-based recreational activities and agritourism, there must be something allowed under those terms. The question is, and this is the question that I'm bringing before the board, what are those things? What kinds of things can we engage in? If you can't have a birthday party, I mean, any kind of a farm-based recreational activity or any kind of agritourism, is going to, it tends that people who are doing those kinds of things are celebrating something. They're called life celebratory events. It doesn't matter really what they are. It can be a birthday party, it can be a graduation, it can be a reunion, whatever it is. That's why people engage in agritourism, and that's why people have farm-based recreational activities. So because those things are now part of the town ordinance, there must be some activity that we're allowed to engage in under that. And my question to the BOS is, what are those activities? What kinds of things? How do we define that? I hope that it's an ongoing discussion about, how we define these things and what they are and who gets to benefit from them.
So before we go further down in the weeds, the original reason that we were here was to talk about this number 4, for you to come about a dispute resolution. But under the definition, because the dispute is not with a resident, it really isn't under our purview to be getting in the weeds and considering this. My suggestion would be, so this isn't something for the board. And, there's a learning curve and a learning process, especially for me as the new person. So I would suggest, and there's a way to do this, to apply to, submit an application for change in zoning regulations. But I also think that you should talk to Patty Brazelin about that farm designation, because that's sort of one of the keys to go to the next step. And
Right.
we talked about this as a process. I think that's one of the keys in your process to go to the next step, to talk about the regulations. I think that your desire to be creative about how you're using the farm and using the land and agritourism is great, but within the confines of the structure of the town government. So, and I'm not cutting you off, but for the sake of process and progress,
Yeah, I understand.
we'll finish this discussion, and because it doesn't.
So can I just refer back to the ordinance?
Where are we heading back to?
Yeah, the right to farm ordinance.
Okay.
It says the selectman may promulgate such regulations and procedures as it deems necessary for the implementation of this section. So that's really why I'm here. I have not had a dispute with anybody. So I didn't come before you because I have a dispute. I came before you because you guys are the administrators, those that are actually chosen to determine what this right to farm ordinance means. And it's really incumbent on you because of the way the ordinance is written.
But
Again, it
the
says
way that I read it is that in the event a dispute arises between an agricultural operator and a resident of the town, and we'll skip all the in-between part, because that, at this point, it doesn't matter.
Right.
either interested party can submit a request to the selectmen for an advisory opinion. So before even it talks about the selectmen promulgating regulations, so it's a progression. So there has to be a dispute between an agricultural operator and a resident of town account. So that's not there.
Right.
So we can't move further down in the language because it doesn't meet that. That's sort of where I'm coming from.
Okay, I mean, I understand that.
And the promulgation, the ability for the selectmen to promulgate regulations is related to the prior sentence. It's based on a dispute.
So you
because
cannot-
the P and Z is the one. They're the promulgate. They are the ones who authority. Yeah, they're the authority for the regulations.
All right, I mean, I understand what you're saying, so, I'll try that approach.
I think the first thing that you need to do is create a definition for agritourism, which nobody seems to have.
Yeah,
We do not have it, so therefore,
have some. I
we
have
don't,
some.
but it's something that's gonna need to be fleshed out and, and figured out and compared to other towns. And then work with the commission to see. I mean, right now, we don't have a definition for what you wanna do, so therefore, you can't do it.
Right.
And that's the way our zoning regulations are written.
Right, but we have spot agriculture, we have spot agri, what we call farming, by putting into the zoning, the right to do a brewery on a farm. So we have taken that step, or zoning has taken that step in the past.
Right.
And I would encourage zoning to actually look at that and say, do we want agritourism, do we not?
Exactly, and
And
that's what I would like Guy to do.
That's
And
what
he's
I-
been asked to do that since 2013.
But I did, in fact, in 2015, I did go.
But we never got a regulation suggestion. You never
Well,
came
that's-
to us with
That's where I'd
anything,
like to
so.
interject, because I think it's not on, I don't think the onus, if you will, if not even onus, it's not the responsibility of somebody who has an idea and is going to use their farm to have to then go to zoning and say, can I do this, is my opinion. I think zoning should take the planning side of zoning and say, what are we going to do in the future with our farms? Yes or no, I mean, whatever the answer is the answer, but I find the lack of planning primarily due to the fact that the overwhelming zoning component is in zoning. The day-to-day,
Right.
so much doing that the zoning actually, and planning doesn't get
Swept to the
the
side.
attention
We just-
that it might in situations like
Right.
this. Because where I just want to go is, it's not just here, it's where are we going economically? And what is planning and zoning thinking about that?
Right.
Because there are sign regulations, there are so many different little things here and there that maybe we need to address or look at.
And we did do that in the 4 years that we were rewriting our zoning regulations. That was the planning portion of what planning and zoning did.
And
And
why
so
wasn't
those
that opportunity
conversations-
why wasn't that opportunity taken, given the fact that?
It was. We did talk about it.
So then the question comes around, is it planning and zoning's position at this point not to do any kind of this agritourism, even though we've decided to do it on a farm brewery kind of concept?
At the point in time that we discussed it, it was the commission's determination not to pursue it. Because they felt that they had an avenue that was open. We had a door that was open to accept people's recommendations during that 4-year process to come in and talk to us about the zoning regulations and to sit down and try to plan with us.
Which I did. And
But
I've got
nothing was ever-
I've got a copy of it, I submitted it.
Yeah, and I don't think
I
we
don't
need to
think
get in
this
the
is
weeds.
the time
I
and
guess
place to go through it. But I
The
think-
only point I'm trying to make is, I think it's an opportunity to
Absolutely.
say, hey, look, let's ask planning and zoning
Right.
to relook at this again.
And that's what I told Guy to do.
If it works under his or whomever's venue, if you will, or his farm, then I think we need to make sure that gets looked at.
And that's what I told him to do, so.
And that's what I
All you
did.
need to do
This
is
is
all you need to do is let me know what month agenda you'd like to be put on,
Donald,
and
my
I'll put it on the
frustration in
agenda.
this is that I did come to the board, and I have it right here, I sent you the email, and you presented it to the board, and I sat down with them right in the middle of the rewrite, And they looked at me, well, they basically said that I was too late, that they weren't gonna address it. Contemporaneously, at the same time, they passed the right to farm ordinance. That includes farm-based recreational activities. So they're allowing it, they've embraced it, but they're saying, for whatever reason, that I can't engage in it. And that's the problem that I have, and that's why I feel like I don't get treated fairly when I go before the board. I've done it several times. So it's not that I'm trying to skirt the issue, I'm trying to address the issue head on with the Board of Selectmen because I was unsuccessful there.
Right.
I was not really given an opportunity.
Well, I guess everybody has an opinion,
Well,
so mine's not the same as yours.
Yeah, I know,
And
but
that's
it's
fine,
on- it's
and that's
on
what
the
makes
tape.
everything go around. The other issue that you have to deal with, and it's something that we can talk about at another time, is the consent agreement that you have signed.
Right.
That's a legal document,
That's
and I
right.
don't know how that's going to affect
Yeah.
anything that planning and zoning does.
That was before the passing of the right to farm ordinance. You were right in 2013 that there was nothing in the regulations that authorized the use of the property the way I was doing it, but now there is.
They're not
Things
in the
have changed.
regulations.
The ordinance, the regulations defer to the ordinance in 1430. I can read it to you again.
I know you can, and I've read it.
Right,
I think
we need to rehash
Thank you.
this. I think for the sake of having a thorough conversation, which I feel like we have, that it's a new year, we're 5 years later, it's 2020, there's a new chair on P and Z. I think that there's no reason for you to not go back to the P and Z and walk through that process with them again. And I have absolute good faith that Donna and Matt Winter and the commission will thoughtfully consider your application, and that's how it works. There's an application to change the regulation.
But it's not, it's just that it's not really a change of use. I mean, that's the thing that for me is, agriculture is already a use, and it's defined by the ordinance to include those things. So it's not really a change of use, and the activity doesn't even rise to the level of a use. It's just an occasional occurrence. But if that's the procedure,
it's not a change of use, it's a change
Right,
to the
change to the
regulations to
regulation.
allow
Right.
agritourism.
So it's not an application for a permit, it's an application to come to the commission to change the regulations. So it's,
to allow agritourism, which right now is not allowed, even though the ordinance says it's allowed. I mean, how can that be? How can the ordinance be in contradiction with the zoning regulations?
I'm gonna just finish the conversation, and I will come to the next P and Z meeting. I'll meet with you anytime that you want to meet. There's a lot of people here, we have a lot on
All
the
right,
agenda.
okay, yeah, I'm not looking to take
And
anybody's time.
And I'm certainly not cutting you off, and we'll continue the conversation.
Is your property considered now a farm?
Evidently, it's not.
It's not.
But we considered it when we bought it
No.
as a farm, but
You-
what I'm told is that
So
I'm just
that's what we
asking,
talked
when you purchased
about.
the property.
when
was
I
it
purchased the
considered a
property,
farm?
it was a farm.
It was
That's right.
categorized on the tax records as a farm?
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, it was. I know that it was because the.
And how many acres do you have?
It's 5 acres.
Oh, only 5,
Yeah,
okay.
but 4 of them are dedicated to agriculture.
But I think that, I think what would be helpful for us if we actually are meeting this out is to really understand what a farm is.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you're okay,
Well,
you take hay off.
I know what a farm is.
Well, I know you
Well,
have.
This,
right.
this is different though.
Right.
than the real
So-
deal.
Well, so no, I think
I'm very
it's,
familiar with the property.
right, but I think it's
That was my
not as
grandfather's
different.
property. Yeah.
So
But
you
I think
know-
in a way, hold on, I think in a way, we do need to expand our thinking of a farm. A farm is, 100 years ago, and even 50 years ago, it was pretty well defined what the social, cultural accepted terminology was for a farm. But farming is expanding in a lot of different ways. There's interesting bills that have been proposed in the last couple of days in the legislature that are, again, gonna change the way that we think about the word farming and what a farm is. So I think that we have to be willing to, like Chris said, to expand our thinking and our concept of what a farm is,
Right.
beyond cows and pigs and chickens and hay.
Right, but we are not in the position to decide
we are.
what it
No, we're
is.
not.
What I'm
Correct.
saying
Nope.
is simply planning and zoning, when they come back to us, say, they can give us an outline, and then we take the ordinance.
Right, right.
I don't, it's chickens, what's our job? It's not to figure out what that is.
So I appreciate you coming in
Okay.
and the conversation.
Good, that's great. Well, I appreciate you giving me the time.
Next is, there was an FOI request that we received from Holman and Conley regarding looping back to a special permit application, and you've already received the information, communication back out to the attorney from land use of that all the documents are ready, and we'll be basically closing the loop on the FOI request. Just a sort of a housekeeping matter. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I've not heard from them, so I have no idea when they're coming in.
Okay.
And it's really, it wasn't a request for us to make their copies. It was a request for them to be able to come in and look at the file and possibly copy. So I'm just waiting, and I've not heard anything.
And did you understand what the last request was? Because I
No,
didn't
and
understand it.
Mike asked them for further definition of that, and
And I did too, and they remained
I've not heard
steadfast
anything.
in
Request.
their wording.
Okay.
New business. We have some subcommittees that have been longstanding, less longstanding, that need to be disbanded. It's more of a housekeeping and thanking them for their service. We have the KVFD Finance Review Committee, the Streetscape Committee 2, the Public Restroom Committee, and the Social Services Hiring Subcommittee. If you all want to talk about these separately, or if you want to make a motion.
I can speak to the KVF, D Finance Review Committee. We made great strides, I thought. I believe everybody who was involved in it felt that it was very positive. It was supposed to include, or the KVFD's budgeting process was supposed to include their own internal capital plan, which was things under $20,000 or less. And I don't know if any of that's happened. We just sort of, the meeting stopped and they never resumed. So I don't know. It was really at the behest of the fire department. So we jumped in. They haven't asked for any more help. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all. But
I can't, but I wouldn't mind leaving it in place, because I think we're going to be looking to continue it.
so isn't the fire department in the process of hiring a bookkeeper? So maybe once that person's hired, it would be appropriate to
That's
to
not
do it.
fine.
And that person was hired.
That person was hired.
Right.
Okay.
I just didn't know if I should say that.
Well,
But yeah, they were hired. Just, they haven't started yet or anything, so.
okay. Well, I could speak for myself that I'd still be willing to continue that if we need to. I'm sure Mark Savetic and Mark McWinney, who also were on it, would do so. So I don't know if we need to actually disband it.
But Mark McWinney's not on
He's
board.
not.
Oh, he's not.
So they would need to.
So we
appoint-
need
So they would need
revamp it.
to-
Right.
Well, it doesn't matter. We can reconvene it, or put it
Yeah, I
together.
would just
and-
not disband this committee.
Who was the chair of that committee?
Alan. Because it was a group. So let's do this. Why don't you ask the fire department if they want any further assistance? If they do, then we will continue it and open it and keep going. If not, then we'll just disband it.
Streetscape 2, they made their recommendation in, I want to say October. Their charge was completed.
Mm-hmm. You make a motion that we disband it.
So,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Public Restroom Committee.
I don't even know who was on that committee.
Okay. Joyce.
oversee the project, the construction of
So
it.
that's-
And, yeah, so
I
they
make a motion then.
their charge.
Thank you. I make a motion, we disband the public restroom subcommittee or committee.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed, abstentions?
I make a motion that we disband the social services hiring subcommittee, yes, they have
I'll second it.
done their job.
Any discussion?
Thank them for their work.
All those in favor? Opposed, abstentions? We're moving on to the Kent Affordable Housing Grant, the block grant.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
turn
A,
the
B, C,
floor-
D, E, F, G.
Right.
Did I take it?
I'm gonna turn the floor over to Barbara, our treasurer, and Bill Backrack is also here to.
I had put together a little synopsis of the information that I had learned at the seminar, and I forwarded it to everybody, and I hope you had time to read it. I think what happened is when they first came before the board to ask if the town would sponsor this grant for them, we didn't really have enough information, but we said, go ahead. I went to the seminar, we got enough information, so I'm asking you to again either endorse or not moving forward, because I think the information is substantially different than what we were proceeding with. And then I'll let Bill.
Not to get in the weeds, can you, just sort of the highlights of what's potentially, what the grant
Well,
deliverables.
it's
and-
more than just signing a grant application and submitting it. We have to actually be hands-on administrators of the grant, and it will require me to go to a 5-day seminar to become certified by the Department of Housing to administer this grant. All this information was outlined in the document that I had emailed. There will be considerable amount of time from my office to be invested in this grant. And I just didn't want to move ahead without making sure that I had permission. Sure.
The only thing I didn't see in there was, this would only be for this grant, correct? Or would you then be eligible to do other grants as being, when you go to the 5-day course?
The other grants probably through the Department of Housing if there were any
Or
that
only the
qualified.
public housing, correct?
Well, it's just for this type of grant it's a pass-through grant, it's federal money, so
Right.
yes.
What I mean is it wouldn't like certify you to do other
Statewide,
types
no.
of grants, correct?
Well,
All right.
It might look favorably upon me that
Right.
I'd have the certification, but I don't think it would.
No. Okay.
This grant has an opening once a year.
Yeah.
So we're trying to take a shot at this year's, and then next year some other group in town that's an eligible activity might want to apply. And then I think your certification would still
Absolutely.
apply.
It's good for 3 years, the certification. And then I would have to do continuing education or whatever it is that they require to keep my certification.
So it's a general, certified grant administrator course, it's not a Department of Housing certified grant. It's-
Oh, I think it's a Department of
It's a
Housing
Department of
That's why,
Housing.
that's what.
specific, I think they created the agenda and they created the classes and they created the whole thing.
And so your expenditures to this date have been about $750 is what you wrote.
Well, that's,
And
yeah,
Anticipating,
it's hard to guess. At this point, between now and the time the application would be filed, I'm anticipating somewhere in the average of 2 hours a week from my office, not including whatever other overhead there is.
So one of the challenges is that the grant, the KH would want to hire a grant administrator who
Mhm.
would walk them through pieces and parts. But the block grant, the federal government requires that a town employee also be the grant administrator. So there's this, even if they're paying
Gotcha.
somebody who they're gonna hire, and Barbara sent out an RFP, and and we had the bid opening, for that position, even if it were to, even if that were to happen, it still requires the town to have an employee, so it's,
Which makes sense. I mean, it's,
I think at the workshop that you attended, you got a lot of clarification about what the town's role would be in this whole thing.
Yes.
And that role does involve time. I've also been able to determine that time, the town can be reimbursed for its administrator, you.
Right, but there's still that restriction of the 33,000.
right.
That's all the amount of the grant that you can spend on administration, whether it's me or the other grant administrator. That's it. So,
And in theory, it would be roughly $28,000
that was what the bid
For the-
came in
for
for.
that bid, so it leaves $5,000 over the course of 2 years.
right, it doesn't sound like it's gonna be a lot of hours, though, I mean, it'll be something, but it doesn't.
It's hard to say. There's a lot of oversight that has to happen, from even going
It
out.
has to come from the town.
Right, and interviewing employees and documenting the fact that they are being paid the federal wage rates, all of this type of oversight, layers and layers and layers. And I believe that it came into place because the Department of Labor wants to be able to report back to the federal government that they have every single requirement fulfilled. And so they're putting a lot of extra regulation on the towns, and that's why even if we hire a grant administrator, that doesn't take us off the hook.
Right,
That's
right.
just, if they call up and they want an answer, they want it from me, they don't want it from the grant administrator or from the contractor. They're, or either me or Jean, I mean.
And my worry is that you're being too gracious and saying 2 hours, a week, because things like those interviews that have to happen, like she would have to go to the job site or prearrange to meet a certain, so if there's, let's say there's an electrical subcontractor, a carpentry subcontractor, and a HVAC subcontractor, she would have to arrange on a regular basis to interview in person, one person from each one of those subcontractors regularly, and that would have to be done in, that is also defined, right, where it has to be done. It couldn't be done at the coffee shop, it couldn't be done over the phone, so it would likely have to be done here, so then those employees are gonna now be coming off the job site. I just worry that it's gonna.
The 2 hours a week was really just a thought between now and the time the application gets filed.
Right.
Once the application gets filed and the grant gets awarded, it's a whole nother ballgame.
And we have another part of the challenge is that we can't see the application until a letter of intent is submitted. So you can't go on the internet and find the application to sort of get a feel for are the deliverables, are there 15 deliverables or are there 85 deliverables?
And the manual is huge. And it was interesting because there's a requirement that we have to submit this intent to apply. And the original document that they have on their website says that we have to email this completed form by Friday, February 22nd. Well, Friday, February 22nd doesn't exist, that's a Saturday. So Bill pointed that out in an email to me today, and I went back on their website, and now it says by Friday, February 28th. So things are in flux on their side, that's for sure.
It's a public hearing must be held.
2 public hearings have to be held in conjunction with this grant, and one of them has to be held before the grant application can be submitted.
That's what I'm picking up on, so,
That's a requirement.
and is that to give the public the chance to say, no, we don't want to do this? What's the
It's to
objective?
Well, it's to satisfy, and with the documents that I emailed you, there was this State of Connecticut CDBG Small Cities Program. It's to satisfy the national objectives,
Okay,
which is all part of this whole process of layering.
But it's conceivable the town would say, no, we don't back this.
In the application, we have to submit documents that explain what happened at the public hearing and what the public input was, and that will come into play
I see.
when they
Score those.
score the application, right?
So
Did
this is
you
done
wanna-
from a little bit more than just support.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just signing a grant application.
But I'd love to hear from Bill.
It's not our grant of choice, but it's what's there. And the governor has instituted his debt diet and took away what we applied for initially. And this is what's left to apply for, and I think it's incumbent upon us, on behalf of the residents, to try to get these fixes done, to try to get the sidewalks on the roadway repaved, to fix the curbs, fix the stairs, exterior stairs that have concrete issues, to upgrade the interior lighting to make it safer in there, remove tile at the doorsteps that needs work. So we're proposing this on, we're willing to work hard, and not our favorite grant proposal, and we ask the town to work with us on that.
So on the other side of this conversation, on the more positive side, the Kent Affordable Housing has already gone through the process of, what's the name of that report? I don't wanna get it wrong.
Certified needs assessment.
So they've had a certified needs assessment, which
As a requirement.
is a requirement, so, and that's a, not right, not inexpensive, not, something that somebody can dash off, so it's great that that's already done. So just so, for the sake of productivity tonight, I don't think that there's a compelling reason to not put in a letter of intent, so the next step would be to, I'm not really saying that properly, it's not a letter of intent.
Well, it's just a little form to fill out, and I have to email it to this person.
So that will give us access to the application, so that at least Barbara and Bill can then see the application to.
But do we anticipate some problem that the application is gonna say, oh, we don't wanna do this because it's gonna cost man hours? I mean, the town has committed to the affordable housing. It's clear it's aging to position. They've gotten backup that says that. The only place they can really get money is through a grant. So either we decide now to throw our weight behind it and spend extra money and time Barbara's, but do it, or not, and then they go away and find some other money. I think it's that simple. It's not a lot of money, at least. And Barbara's rightly so saying, don't cage me in because we don't know.
Right.
But I think the town has already said, we're committed to this. It is proven that it has filled a need here in town. I think we should do something.
The certification, when I was at the seminar, I asked the administrator there where the seminars were gonna be for the certification. He said, well, they've received some push to include the eastern side of the state, so they're gonna probably have it over in the eastern side of the state. And I said, well, I hope you're gonna have lodging, because I'm not gonna commute every day. And he said, well, we'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So that could be an expensive week, but it is what it is.
I think we accept that it's going to be an expensive time or period, but once the grant has been allocated and once the projects are done, are you finished?
Well,
There's
no, I'm
audit
not
time.
finished until the grant is closed out, and there's another layering process of doing that properly, et cetera.
So give us a timeline, you think?
The grant's a 2-year grant.
It's a
That's the
2-year grant,
maximum.
so-
You've gotta have all the work done,
All
you've
the
gotta
work.
have all of everything, paperwork done
Mhm.
within that 2-year period. And one of the things that they talked about at the seminar was, as Bill pointed out, this grant comes available every year, so a lot of entities that do this regularly will apply for half of the grant in 1 year, and then the other half of the grant in the second year, and that gives them a 3-year window instead of
Gotcha.
just the 2-year window.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Bill, do you anticipate a build-up in 2 years, or do you need 3?
The items that I mentioned to you, which I think are gonna be our priority items, can be done in a year or less.
One of the things, when we had a meeting on Friday, and then after the meeting on Friday, we got on the phone with the person that did submit the proposal to be the grant administrator, and then they were talking, Bill and he were talking about having a not a pre-construction meeting, but some sort of a meeting about deciding, prioritizing. And it dawned on me at that point that if we become the facilitators for this grant, I'm gonna have to be included in those kinds of meetings. So yes, I think the 2 hours a week is very slight, but I'm hopeful that between now and the grant application submission, that would be the case.
So I'll make a motion to submit the,
Before you do that, we'll need to schedule a hearing before you can submit that.
Before we can submit the grant application, not the intent to apply.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
so I'll make a motion to submit the intent to apply
Okay.
form for the CDBG grant.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion?
The only thing I would like to see is, based on that, if you can huddle and come back to us and just give us a better, if you can, time frame or expenditure component that we would be obligated to in the town. It can be rough, it can just be something, but I think it's just in fairness to the taxpayer, we really need to explain to them that we are going to allocate. And maybe we just pick a number, whatever you feel comfortable with, if that works, but something that we can give them, the taxpayer.
And until she sees the application, it would be a.
Well, and also I need to have some discussion with, if that's the other, we opened up a proposal on Friday for a grant administrator, and the town is actually the one that would sign that and agree to have this grant administrator.
Okay.
And I think I sent you copies of his proposal, didn't I, or did I not do that?
You did, when you did the wrap-up of the.
So if we're gonna do the intent to apply, then I think that needs to be considered, right? You wanna hire this grant administrator, right?
Oh, he's the person that
So,
has guided us through
the RFP
all the additions we've been able to make over the
requires
last
that
10 years.
he actually write the grant, so he would be doing that, and I would be sort of in conjunction with him. He would be doing the lion's share of that work. That's why I came up with the 2 hours.
But he comes in after the intent, I mean, you just.
Well, you guys are gonna have to make a motion to
So
hire.
let's get through this
Yeah.
motion, which I think is a fairly simple one, and then let's continue the conversation, just so we don't get bogged down. Is that okay?
I'm good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? So the timing and the piece of that grant administrator,
Because he specified in here that he, oh, here it is. Proposal cost of services. The total cost for support is $28,000. The first component, submittal of the funding application, will be $8,000. Half will be due at completion of the required public hearing on the grant application, and half will be due at the time of the submittal of the grant application. So right up front, we're agreeing to $8,000. Now, in our discussion on Friday, you insinuated that you had money set aside already to pay that.
And when we came to you early January, we said the payment to the grant administrator prior to the grant being funded would come from Ken Affordable Housing.
so we make sure that we don't get into this sort of cart before the horse or
Mm-hmm.
chicken and egg situation. So do you feel like we need to make that motion tonight to,
Yes,
That would be good.
because there's not a big window here.
right?
And the longer we can't get together and start working on this, the harder it's gonna make it. So yes, I would appreciate that. If we're gonna move forward, that's the next step in moving forward, in addition to me submitting the intent to apply.
What
So
happens
my
if you don't?
worry is, right, my worry is what if we submit the intent form and we have to scrape Barbara up off the ceiling when she sees the deliverables and requirements of the application for her as the town employee, and we say, wow, now we are contracted with somebody to pay them $28,000.
He has language right in here that says if the project is not awarded, no cost related to the second component will be due. It's right in here, and it says the second component, after the grant is awarded, will be billed proportionately each month based on the number of months. So it's an $8,000 upfront cost, which Kent Affordable Housing is willing to pay. So I think, yes, you do need to do this. You need to accept this, agree, engage, whatever. There's nowhere to sign on here, so I think you just have to accept it and agree to engage him as specified in here for the proposed cost of services, the first component, etc.
So that's a proposal. Would we need to, and again, I'm finding my way, would we need to have Randy create a contract based on that, or can we engage based on a proposal?
Well, he doesn't have he didn't give us a contract,
We do
right?
not.
Right.
This is a proposal for his services.
And so if we accept those, a contract will be drafted.
Okay.
I don't know if we do it, I'm sure he'll probably give us his boilerplate. He may, or.
Yeah. I mean, he laid out his terms pretty clearly in
Right.
there.
So I just have a general question to those who know this world. Is this the movement, or is this just because of the specifics of HUD, or are we anticipating in the future any grants that we go after are going to require this kind of?
Yes, that's
And
the
if
movement.
so, are we creating precedent and saying to all those who out there, the fire department, anyone else who wants to go get a grant, that, yeah, we're the guys that will take it on and back you because we have to? So I'm not saying that in positive or negatively, it's just something that if indeed this is what you're sensing,
I think accountability has become a big issue.
and it makes sense, it makes a lot of sense.
And they're putting procedures in place to make sure that everybody's accountable every step of the way, and nobody's gonna get caught with saying, well, I'll ask him. That they aren't gonna go for that.
And to lean on somebody big like the town that says,
Right.
you have the resources to monitor this, and I'm gonna make you
Right.
monitor. Which, that's part of getting money, I guess, that makes some sense. But where I'm going is, if this is the trend we're going to, if it's an outlier, okay, but if it's a trend we're going to, we're not just saying, okay, to these guys, potentially, we're going to all other entities outside or tangentially involved with us. It
Maybe
says-
it is an outlier in the sense that this particular agency is getting its hand slapped by
Okay.
the federal government.
I don't know the world, so I don't know how that works. But I think we need to be
And that's
clear
the
where
sense.
what we're stepping into with respect to guiding these grants from.
The
And that's the
same,
sense that you got at that
the
workshop.
$500,000 grant that we have for the side streetscape is through the Department of Housing. So the same person
Same.
that I'm working with was at this seminar, so I marched up and introduced myself and chatted with him a few minutes. And it is my sense that accountability is where it's at. And even when we applied for the extension on the grant, they wanted a very clear timeline of what was gonna happen and when, et cetera, before
Very
they would
detailed,
even.
very specific.
Yes, before they would even consider an extension. So I think accountability is front and center.
So this may be a guinea pig
sponsored grants for other entities too. Connie Manis, and I forget what she came for us for. It was something. Yeah, there's been other grants. She didn't
Oh,
get
no.
her grant.
No, I know we've
Applied
done
for it,
that,
but she
but
didn't get it.
it's never gone to this
No,
level.
that's right.
And if this is the
getting
level we're going to,
more
we need to know
interest.
that,
Mhm.
that's what we're gonna be doing.
So there's no motion on the table, but we were discussing
Right.
the possibility
You
of.
passed the other one.
Right. Of considering a motion to approve, accept and approve the,
Hiring this Housing Enterprises Inc.
Well, I'm all for, if indeed accountability is going to be mandated all the way down, that it makes sense that they're tangentially tied to us and others will in the future, that we undertake it. And we hire this individual as recommended, and see a contract, make sure Randy's happy with that contract. If maybe he writes it, I don't know. And begin the process.
so how would you like that motion to read?
Oh, goodness. It was on
You're
White
supposed to say
Stone
so
Bridge at
moved. That
4:30.
makes it easy. Puts it on that.
How would I like to word that? How would I like to word that? What do we got? We got, what is the name of the firm?
Housing Enterprises Inc.
Housing.
So they were the only respondent to this RFP that was sent out, and there was a deadline set, and the bid, we had a bid opening with Bill, myself, Barbara, and Virginia Bush, and there was one proposal received. So
Was
it
the bid
could,
opening on Friday?
Mhm.
And
So
we I'm sorry.
it could be to accept the submitted, one submitted proposal
Yeah.
and bid to,
I think we need to agree to engage and
and enter into a contract with him, something like that.
And just so I'm clear, we are hiring him on behalf of Kent Affordable Housing, correct? Or are we hiring him?
he's got to answer to us.
Yeah.
We're hiring him. We put out the RFP.
Right. It was a town of Kent RFP, it wasn't a H RFP.
Okay. So Kent Affordable Housing folds, and we go ahead with the project. What happens if you fold?
We get
No,
it
sir.
all, no.
No, seriously, I mean, who has to take care of it? Does the state?
Well, I've heard doomsday people saying, you know, it falls on the town, but we don't fold.
Well, no, look, I know that, but
It's not clear to me. It's not too clear to me. Different projects we've done may end up in different people's laps, but
okay. Well, it's just, I want to be clear, because if it does fold, we're going to be on, so just, it's unlikely as it is. We've seen private organizations in this area fold, that no one expected to fold, especially in your world. You know,
Just like if we don't get the grant, what happens?
well,
No, you know what I'm saying, and the place needs repairs.
oh, well,
That's,
and they can't handle it, well, that's I think another issue, but, okay, I'm clear on that. So I make a motion that we engage Housing Enterprises, Inc. To undertake.
Based on their proposal,
Thank you, based on their proposal of what date?
February 3rd, 2020.
February 3rd, 2020. And make sure that a contract is signed between the town of Kent and Housing Enterprise.
Second? I'll second that. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara, thank you.
Next is the sewer belt press. So we have a very specific, resolution that I'm going to read. and read the following resolution entitled, Resolution Appropriating up to $600,000 for a sewer belt filter press and to fund the expenditure by appropriating $150,000 from the Kent Sewer Commission's Capital Reserve Fund and authorizing the issue of $450,000 financing to be paid from sewer revenues and additionally secured by the town's general obligation pledge pursuant to section 7-263A of the general statutes. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the entitled resolution and incorporate its full text into the minutes of the meeting?
So moved.
I'll second that. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
On this, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some discussions on it. The only discussion I have is that we've talked about capital plans for a long time now. And they're saying they need something that's gonna cost $600,000 now, when maybe they should have been saving for this thing 20 years ago. And I know it's not, money isn't coming from the town, but it's coming from the obligation fund, or technically our good credit standing. And I think it should be noted that at some point, they need to start saving their money and raising enough revenue.
They actually have been, and they're in the process of looking at their rates. They have a lot of things going on
Right, I
right
know.
now.
Right.
And they do take, and I don't remember off the top of my head, I think it's 3% and 5% of all their annual revenue, and they set it aside for capital improvements. And last year, and I don't have that information in front of me either, but they spent, I want to say $250,000 upwards of on specific capital improvements out of their own funding. This is just something that has to happen. They've been doing a lot of things in the last, I don't know, 10 years?
Not even. It's only been 5, 6 years
Well.
where they've really started to.
And they do have a capital plan,
Mhm.
and this is part of it.
I will add to that. It is, I've been witnessing a real drill down, if you will, from them. The board itself, the
Right.
transition, what they've done and how they've done it. You know, they lost Art Seabury and transitioning there. And this is just one of the many components, and we're going to see more. And maybe your question is, what else is going to come down the pipe that we should know about now and maybe hear about? But
That's not for this.
that's not what's here. But I think this is clearly another example of them. And I believe they've been trying to eat this one out for much longer than it could, but it just
It is, it's gone beyond.
so. But you raised a good point. But
I just wanted to mention that in
I
the
think
discussion.
it makes sense that we understand a little bit more from them what they may be asking.
So this motion is just to waive a reading of the
That is correct.
entire text. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Is there a motion that the resolution be adopted?
I'll make a motion that the resolution be adopted
Second.
as read by.
More discussion? Nothing? Chris? Oh. All those in favor? All
Sorry.
those in favor?
I just
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
thought you were not talking, meant we were voting.
Thank you.
Could you read the last sentence, please?
Oh, yes,
For the minutes.
sorry, you're right. I declare the resolution adopted.
Thank you.
The next item is the Kent Fire tax abatement list. There's gonna be no action taken on that tonight, and it'll be on the March agenda as an item likely for action. EMS staffing is gonna be the same, so there's gonna be no action taken on that tonight, and it will move to the March agenda.
If we're doing those two, can we also just make sure that we have that finance review committee and anything else that's related to the fire department all in one lump? That would be great.
The social services,
Parking lot.
I'm sorry.
You missed parking lot.
Oh, I'm sorry, Park and Rec, I'm following my list and not following it. We have a, request from the Park and Rec director to use the Kent Town Hall front lawn for its 2020 summer concert series, July 2nd, 16th, 23rd, 30, and August 6th, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. The commission will provide a portalette for these concerts.
So moved.
Second. Any questions or discussion?
We do not have a portalette here anymore, correct, because of the bathrooms.
They bring it in for the concert.
Just
Just for the
the-
concert.
just for-
yeah,
They used to have one here in summer, but they do not because of the bathrooms, correct? Okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Now we move on to the social services assistant. From a memo from Leah Polaro, who's the social services director. The social services assistant, Debbie Christensen, has completed the 90-day employee test period. Upon satisfactory completion of this test period, the assistant position would increase to an hourly rate of $18 an hour. I request the selectmen make a motion to approve this hourly rate change. Leah.
So moved.
Second.
And that was part of the hiring process, so you guys are all over that. All those in favor? Aye. Next is the, fire marshal's position. So, during a budget conversation, it came to light that, the fire marshal was many years ago a hired town employee, and around the time of Jack Kinney, right, when he was the treasurer of the town, it was recommended that he move to a 1099, an independent contractor, and the discussion was that everything was fine, nothing would change. So we discovered through this, just a chance conversation, that as a 1099 employee, he is not covered under our workers' comp. So we would like to correct that. I would like to correct that. His rate is, I believe, $40.85 an hour. That would not change. Nothing would change except his status. He would become an employee, and he would get a W-2 annually. We met with him and talked in detail about, right now he sort of bills us for different pieces and parts of how he does his job, and that would now convert over to just an hourly rate, and that's.
And how many hours is it anticipated?
That wouldn't change. Nothing would change except the ability to include him on our workers' comp. Versus.
Right, but he's part-time, so he's not actually,
We're talking like $35,000 a year, give or take, right?
But that wouldn't change.
That's correct.
Nothing would change. It's really a status change of his position in
And-
order to, and we spoke with Kerma,
So-
in order to get him on workers' comp.
explain to me why we wouldn't do that then with the building official. Does he have workman's comp? He does.
Yep.
So how does he have it stand on a clerical?
Through an error
Just a.
decades ago.
It was a misunderstanding apparently when he went to 1099. He was under the assumption that he wouldn't lose anything by going to that. The town recommended that he would be able to get a better tax break on his expenses, that sort of thing was the way it was presented to him. So he had assumed he's had it all along through the town.
So even if you're an independent contractor, you still get workers' comp coverage?
Normally you do not.
If you're a worker, but not if you're an independent contractor.
But he believed that
No, so the building official, isn't he an independent contractor?
he is.
So how is
But he carries his own workers' comp.
Because, just so I understand it, he covers his own workers, so he does it, he doesn't rely on us.
Correct.
So why are we doing this with Stan?
Because it's very expensive for him to carry his own workers'
No,
comp.
because he was an employee, and the town said, do you want to do it? When Stan said, is that going to have any changes? Everything else is status quo. They said yes to him. So we are fixing a situation that was,
So what we're talking about is a promise, was that written down anywhere?
no.
I mean,
But the
Promise as
What-
far as,
we all know what went on. Somebody said, we're gonna switch you, don't worry, everything's
Right,
fine.
right.
Nothing was written down.
Right.
And yet, what we do not do is cover independent contractors.
well,
We don't.
Yeah.
it's not that we don't, it's that Kermit doesn't.
It's not possible.
Okay, I just don't wanna get into situations where we're doing something for someone and not for someone else. And saying, you know, you clean it up, if you don't, or you leave it alone.
And does he have assistants get paid the same way?
He pays his assistants.
He doesn't have an assistant here.
Well, if he has someone to cover for him, right?
The town pays, or is that changed?
Right, he has
He has an
deputies.
assistant, he has a deputy
Deputy.
fire marshal that he pays if he's not here.
Yeah.
It used to
Right,
be
but
the
not an
town
assistant.
paid.
Well, if Stan doesn't respond and he has to send the deputy gets paid.
But I
From the
understand,
town.
well, that's my
From
question.
the
is
town.
From the
From
town.
the town, so they're not covered under workers' comp then if they get hurt on the.
Yeah, they are, because they're paid by the town.
Because they're paid by the town.
No, they're paid as a 1099, they're not paid as an employee either.
That's not good.
That's what I'm saying, that's my question.
That's why we're trying to fix
I
it.
used to have that rule.
Right, that's why I
I
was
did
waiting
not
for
know
you to
that.
say that.
That's the problem.
Right.
They believed
And you're
that
in
they
a
were.
very hazardous situation.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying,
Well, I
that's why I brought it up.
understand, I understand it. I understand exactly how it went down.
You're making sure that it's.
I just don't wanna make a mess.
Right.
And what I recommend, rather than acting on it, is figure it out, come to us so that it's even, Steven, and everything makes sense. And if it's part of a contract, let's do it, but I just don't wanna get into a situation, like Ed said, we're covering one, we're not covering another. We've got
Yeah.
building official.
The building official is a contracted employee. You've got a 4-year contract with him. You don't have a contract with Stan.
So is Stan an employee?
He will be, or should
He
be.
will be a part-time employee.
What is his status right now?
He's a
1099.
he comes under
But-
an independent contractor with
So
no
then-
contract.
But we don't have a contract.
So
Nor
let's
have we
clean it
ever.
all up. Let's get
That's
a
what we're trying
contract
to do.
written. Right. But
You should do
is-
the same thing for the assistants then.
That's part of
That's,
the
I
plan.
think that's what we should deal with, clean up all of that stuff so that whatever we're offering him is written down, it's written down consistently throughout. But if he's an independent contractor, you have to give a lot of thought to whether Manley should be paying his own or not,
Well, you're already is paying his own.
or not. I mean, I understand where it came from, we promised him, or at least there was this agreement or assumption, right?
So if we don't resolve this quickly
Right.
and something happens,
He's not covered.
thank you.
Although he must have liability insurance somehow through Sharon and Cornwall.
Sharon is a full-time employee.
So,
So that's a different, he's a town employee, they're full-time. But he does have 3 other towns that have the same situation.
Look, I'm not trying to make it a mess for him, I'm just trying to make it administratively, make it right.
And that was our proposal, was to make it a W-2 employee.
So what do we do? So making him a W-2
Employee,
employee.
correct, that
So
is.
that's
our-
really the shift.
Correct,
Yes.
so we're from 1099 to W-2. So he would become,
And I apologize, you.
Right, but I didn't understand why we were shifting him, and the only reason is we promised him something and.
we're just
he
trying
didn't
to
get it.
fix the wrong.
So every independent contractor will cover their own liability, like Joe.
Correct.
except for his deputies,
Whose deputies?
No, he
Stan's deputies.
No,
Well,
we
if
need
they're
to
town
fix
employees, they're
police
already in
too.
it.
We need to fix them as well.
That's
They
what I'm
will
saying.
also become, so it's fire marshal and deputies will become employees of the town via W-2.
And we can make that resolution and not just,
Oh,
we can just say we're changing a position from,
you were willing to do it, you had talked about doing it for the building inspector. You had talked about hiring one.
no,
No, he was just
but
asking.
do we have that authority without going to the town and saying,
Yes, you do.
we do?
You're the
I don't know.
administrators.
Right, and
You created the positions.
right.
So we
I
could
don't
say
see
we
where
don't want-
we're prohibited from doing that.
Okay.
And he is in agreement. Obviously, he's not here this evening. I mean, he's in agreement with this, so it's not like we're doing something and then have to go and explain it to him after.
But if you want us to go back and relook at it, talk to Kerma and Randy about the deputy, there's one deputy right now.
They have to be covered if we pay them.
Correct.
Exactly.
They have to.
So,
Yeah.
So really cleaning this up is what you suggested, is just hiring Stan. We have the authority to do that. Make a motion.
I'll second it then.
And the deputies.
Discussion.
Yes, but we should have real specific language as to their job and what they get, yes.
we have that and that won't change. Nothing changes about their duties, their position, their title, their compensation.
Well, it does change a little bit. You're now directly their boss. And, you know, as opposed to hiring another consultant, right?
Right, but and I'm not trying to back us into a corner, but the alternative is that we make them pay their own workers' comp.
You mean if we leave the status quo? Yeah.
I'm just trying,
No, I got you. Well, that's where I was going in the beginning, is like, who gets, so, well, either or, he doesn't mind being an employee, he doesn't mind being independent contractor, he just wants it covered. That's all it is. And so,
and he didn't understand,
okay, I get it. So going forward, that means that if the present person retires tomorrow, we're out looking to hire someone.
right, I mean, either way.
Okay.
I'm not following.
No, it was just a question. I'm trying to understand that we are now going to be the boss from not just you're a contractor, we don't like you, we can fire you tomorrow.
No, he's appointed. And he's appointed indefinitely, from what I understand from the
For a lifetime.
lifetime. Until he decides that he wants to leave, unless you find cause to release him. Am I not right?
He's an
Kind of hard to
appointee.
get rid of a fire marshal.
It's very hard to get rid of a fire
almost,
marshal.
yeah,
Once
in
they're
the building.
appointed, they're basically appointed for life until you can, unless
to
you
find
come
cause.
to terms or you find cause. So it's not that you're hiring him, you're changing
So
his status.
I was not clear. I thought he was a hired contractor.
He's an appointed.
He is an appointed,
fire marshal.
yes,
Who
an
is
appointed
paid,
position.
who is paid by the town.
There's some specific statutory language.
Oh, thank you.
Because of the fire marshal and the building official.
So it's a
both have
statutory driven
language.
position,
Yeah.
of which is then.
Because your town
appointed.
has to have a fire
Right.
marshal.
Right.
And they have no set hours or anything else, just determined
You
on.
just have to have a
That's
fire
correct,
marshal.
right.
All right, I learned a lot. Let's go.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. We have one appointment to make, for the historic district
Okay.
for James Vick. I make a motion to appoint James Vick to a 5-year term.
Which will expire.
Which will expire on 1/30/125.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Was he an alternate or is just this is just a,
He's the chairman.
He's the chairman.
right, that's what I mean, so it's just we're just
So
reappointing
reappoint.
that position.
Yes,
Right, okay.
housekeeping. All those in favor? Aye. The sewer ordinance, we're gonna schedule a special meeting for that, because it's gonna be a longer conversation, discussion, so that'll come up again.
We had one set, but then the
Right.
schedule got changed, we had to postpone it, so we just need to reset a meeting with the sewer commission to go over that.
Because it's detailed and lengthy. The cell tower, there's not much. I'm hoping to hear from Homeland Towers on their visual report. They collected thousands of photographs from 26 different locations with 3 teams. roads, because there were some that they asked for access to during the week that the boom and balloon were being floated, so that should be coming shortly. Also in the record is a letter from All Points Technology, and this is really to comply with those pre-application requirements in the statutes. And it's a letter that talks to this organization providing public notice to get comment from the public regarding any potential effects that the proposed facility may have upon historic properties. There's a 30-day window on that expires on February 24th, so this is just a letter that talks to it. In follow-up with the Siting Council, there is no sort of outside deliberation negotiation. Their agency considers an application when they receive it, and they can process it. And part of the reason why I wanted to make, and we made that motion way back when, to be a party to any possible application, was so that we would be able to be at the table immediately. So that's gonna get us to the table as quickly as possible if and when this application happens. They haven't submitted it yet. So I think that was all I had on this. I just had one other thing. Oh, that was it. The COG resolution, so this is a continuation from last month's meeting. Chris, you were asking some questions about these two resolutions that we wanted to pass. So again, these are, the COG is a regional organization that promotes and supports, and we all are members to make use of all of the 21 towns, I think it is. And while we may never use the Litchfield Hills Animal Shelter facility, which is gonna be located in Torrington, the TAP grant, which went through this same process with the COG, Torrington will likely not ever have use of our, beautiful new sidewalks on that great day that they happen, but they came together and supported and advocated for our town to do the same thing. So this has no bearing on us. This is support and advocacy for the other towns in the COG. So,
I think we discussed that. We did. Yeah.
but you had asked me to come back with more information, so I'm coming back with more information. And I have a whole packet if you wanna look at the statutes about the concept of regionalization and the purpose of the COGs and everything. So I'm going to make a motion that we have the resolution, is that how I wanna word this? That the legislative body, that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Kent endorses the proposal for the project entitled Construction of Litchfield Hills Animal Shelter Facility under the Regional Performance Incentive Program referenced in Connecticut General Statutes 4-124S in the 2014 supplement.
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then another one, resolved that the Board of Selectmen in the Town of Kent endorses the proposal for the project entitled Regional Produce Processing Service under the Regional Performance Incentive Program referenced in Connecticut General Statutes, Section 4-124S in the 2014 supplement. Need somebody to second.
I'll second.
Whatever.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Streetscape is next. The engineer would like to schedule a site walk. We need to schedule a special meeting to have a bigger conversation about how this is gonna move forward and what this project is gonna need as far as the people part of
You mean the
running
building?
the project.
There's gonna be, need a building committee. And when does he want us to schedule that walk around? Was pretty soon.
Yeah.
They actually tried to do it before. Wasn't it earlier last week we wanted to do it?
They contacted us to say, we'd like to do a sidewalk.
Somewhere I saw
Do
something.
we still have a current committee?
We just disbanded
No, we
that.
just disbanded.
Right, that's what I
Their
mean, so
charge
this
is
would
done.
be a total new committee.
Right.
And this would be for the purpose of engineering or for the whole
This is
process?
the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whole project. So we wanna try to tackle that now, or what's it? I feel like we're behind the ball here,
I think so too.
so.
If you all are ready with who you want to appoint to this.
Oh, and not with that,
Right.
we just have to discuss what we think. I mean, it makes sense to me, as we did with the first committee, is move some people from the second committee. It seems smart to me to take some people from that committee and move to this committee. I'm of the opinion it should be smaller. I'm of the opinion it should be people who actually know materials and understand, reading plans. On the other committees, what we had is people who actually had, we took people who were from the construction and from the architectural and landscape kind of components, and then we put a couple of people on there who were generalists, yeah. But I would think that now, those kind of decisions of what it's gonna look like, pretty much defined in the grant. There may have to be some cuts, because they've already talked about not putting in, well, they took out trees long ago and lampposts and things like that, so, but that was my thoughts. I mean, typically, building committee, I know when they had the one over at the school, it was pretty comprehensive in terms of numbers. So, does anyone know what should it be 3, should it be 5?
Right, what's the right number?
Do you want to, clearly, no, there are schedules you have to consider.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking 5. I think 3 is, I think we're not gonna get
Yeah, well,
the
one
breadth of what
person's-
we want, and right,
Person's sick and then
It-
it's over.
puts into, but I think either 5 or 7, once
What's
you
your
get
thought? I mean,
down
you've had more experience on roads and things
Well,
like
my
that.
thought is, first of all, do we have the full project that we're going forward with, or does that still have to be determined?
That's to be determined.
So you're gonna need either another group of, another committee or the same committee, so you're gonna need at least people on that committee.
It's somewhat determined
It's
already
already
in the
determined.
contract with the
That's what-
engineer.
Right, I don't think we.
Really,
It's
we're looking at
outlined
striking
already.
out pricing.
Right.
And then if things have to change one way or the other, that group has to make a recommendation.
I mean,
And assist the, whoever ends up.
Yeah, we're at the point now where the engineer is trying to get together the bid package, so he's requesting this walk.
right, that's, I
Through-
understand.
to
but
get
I mean, did that
answers to a
include
few
Lane
questions.
Street? Did that include the new sidewalk? It didn't include Lane Street and all that other stuff.
No,
right?
I'll send you a copy of
So
the
if you can send me
contract,
a copy of
so that
the,
you can see what
right,
it includes.
because
I don't
that
think-
determines on how many people you might need on this committee or not on this committee too.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think, on Gene's numbers, but again, that's just sort of, it's not really based on much other than being nimble and,
Right, yeah,
and
in order
yet,
to be able to.
having 8 feet, 10, and 9 feet
Right.
around deciding whether,
Right, the firehouse committee was too big, the second firehouse. committee.
which was how many people?
I don't know, 12, 14, a lot.
There were too many
Yeah.
committees.
I would say 5 or less.
Yeah, I would say 5 less. I mean, yeah.
I mean,
But I don't think you need the committee to do the walkthrough. I think he just wants to do that, bring you all up to speed where he is, get a
Right.
couple questions
Should have been a
answered.
million
He
walkthroughs.
needs to get busy.
Right,
The
exactly.
grant extension expires now on 12/31 of this
This
current year.
Correct.
So he needs to get busy.
And the way we got the extension was by explaining that the timeline was that we were gonna have a bid package out to the public this spring, a contract signed, and construction started so that we could spend that $500,000 by October.
Right.
We need to get going.
So, should we, I'm less inclined to call it 5,
Okay.
just
Right.
for sake of discussion. So we can say, we can go through the process of making a motion that we're gonna charge a committee, but we don't have anybody we don't even have a chair, so my thought is to have this discussion, have it be promoted by our local journalist in the newsletter, in conversation, and people to come to contact the board of selectmen if they're interested in sitting on the board.
Okay, well, that's one of it. I think for continuity's sake, it would be, might be productive to just reach out to those who have served on both committees and ask them if they're interested.
Okay.
And then we winnow it down, and then somebody else comes in from the big group. But I wouldn't want to lose the momentum that many people have put in
Right, a lot
from
of
the
time
beginning
and
to.
energy, yeah.
So, I think that would just be beneficial.
And do you feel like we need to sort of, not necessarily identify, but point at, or looking at people who have this experience, or, identify what we're looking for in this committee so that we make sure that they are able to move forward and have
Well,
the expertise.
if we're in agreement that this is what we want, but you may have a different opinion, you may have a different opinion than when we actually get the list of people. But as I stated from the beginning, it would be, my bent would be towards people who actually know to be able to speak with the engineers on the same level. I would not qualify at that level. You would, somebody who would I've been doing this, I've done this kind of thing before, and when you say this kind of curving, or whatever, or this kind of turn, they know what they're talking about.
asphalt.
Yes, they know what they're talking about. So I would suggest that, that's.
So I'll reach out to the
Let's get a list and then,
committees
and
And then
give it a certain time period, and
if
then
you
we'll
wanna
come
tell
back.
those people, if they reach out to you, that say, we are looking for people who have the mechanics of it, then.
And then we could pick maybe one of us to be on the committee also, might not be a bad idea.
That's a good idea. Congratulations.
You're it, I was just gonna say.
Two knows is quick, so that.
Yeah.
But I would like to do that, get it
Okay.
scheduled.
All right, so when was this walk around that he wanted to do? Did we?
They're ready at any time. So do we want to do the board? Do you want
I think we
me
should
to
do
just
the
do the
board. What do you
walkthrough
think?
with Rick?
Or do you think it's not necessary?
I don't know what I would.
It's a
I think
warn-
we should-
we would need to warn, it would be
It
a
had to be
walking
warned.
meeting.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we, schedule a walk around with the three of us, and it's a public meeting, and ask anyone who's interested in doing to show up
That's a good idea.
from those committees.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
and Mary, it doesn't mean they're gonna be on the committee or we're gonna make decisions, but
Right, just be aware that logistically, having a walking meeting where we're gonna start in here.
Well, I think we
so that-
started
it's a public meeting, anyone can show up.
No, I
right?
understand that, I completely understand that.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to, the realities of having a meeting where we start in here and 20 people walk up and down with the engineer may be a challenge. It's gonna be a challenge for,
I was just in New Orleans, there were thousands of people on Bourbon Street. It's easy. It may be a challenge, but we have to start the process. So, and if the three of us, or even two of us, has to be a one meeting, so I don't see the harm in it. And if you don't show up, you don't show up.
The last streetscape committee did it, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't take any minutes, because there was no decisions supposedly.
You'll have to be walking backwards.
No. Can I recommend perhaps Ed and Rick do it?
Yeah.
That makes more sense. They speak the language. I mean, again, no offense, but
No,
you
I'm
don't,
not
you
taking
openly
it.
admit you don't speak the language, and that way Ed and Rick, and then Ed can report back, and Rick is generally available.
Well, that's fine, but we might still wanna be there anyway. You might wish to walk around and do it, so.
I'm going to rely on the professionals and the
Okay.
people
I
who.
would think at this point it's asking technical questions
Technical
he needs
questions.
Okay.
answered so that he can proceed with the bid package.
Okay.
Crack is
information.
not a technical term. So, I agree with the suggestion that's put out there. I don't necessarily need to do the walk around.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll put Ed in
Okay.
contact with
Sure.
Maloney.
Right, but we need to hustle on getting this,
Yeah.
this committee together. And so, I think we should just put a deadline on when we want to put that together. When, so if you can get that and get some report back, then you can do the reporting with Rick
Okay.
to the group that we select. Does that make sense?
Policy and procedure manual, we're also gonna extend that to March. We're due to do a review. I'd like to sort of get my head around about me as far as how the process should go so that we have some sort of focus so we can be productive. So
I'll follow your lead because this thing's always been a challenge.
So
I know a number of years ago, Darlene and a long time ago, Karen and Darlene
Right. Correct.
reorganized it, and then I think it's been reorganized and added to beyond, so.
The report of the first selectman, so, basically my report is, I think it's 17, I attended 17 meetings, and that was what I,
Remember?
remember and pulled from the various different, calendars. I did go to 2, CCM workshops that give me credit towards, I enrolled in the CCM, they have a program to become a certified municipal official, and it's a 2-year-ish process where you have to get a certain number of credits, and they have 3 different buckets. There's like a development, community, financial, something like that. So I went to 2, one was newly elected officials, and one was nuts and bolts of being a supervisor. I'm going to another one in Newtown on Thursday that has to do with economic development. So it's all relevant issues to all of what we're talking about. Went to the KCS boards and commissions event. That was interesting seeing, we saw every grade and we saw them sort of at work, and it was interesting how Michelle was able to, she like made a bridge through each grade, and just was a nice view of, oh, here's how, someone's KCS career goes, and this is how we grow, smart kids, and it was interesting, and Rick attended that. The COG is very active. I went to a legislative breakfast, and all of our legislators were there, and the session started on the 5th, and there's already a couple of bills that I'm tracking, and next month I'll provide a bill tracking report, and it's a short session, so there won't be too many of those that I'll have for you, but there are already 4 or 5 bills that I'm tracking. And other various meetings that are largely not unremarkable, but I think we're moving along. I did go to the KERMA annual meeting, which was really interesting. We had a 3-hour cybersecurity briefing from CTIC, which is the Fusion Center that pulls together all the people who pay attention to that stuff in a place in New Haven. And it was very eye-opening, and I think there's going to be more to come on our learning more about how we're providing protection for the data that we have in this building in the coming months. There's a lot of focus on it from Homeland Security. John Field, our regional coordinator, talked about it when I met with them. So a lot more coming on that. And there was another report today about another town that was that had a ransomware attack in Connecticut. And in another, in the newly elected officials workshop that I was sitting in, they did a cybersecurity briefing, and just that day there were 4 different towns all had threats. So it's, if you think it's sort of this thing that's happening in the background. It's not this thing that's happening in the background. It's something that we need to pay attention to. Just some other, not random, but issues and things I've been dealing with. One, obviously, the fox, the rabid fox in town. So Andrew was really great. I was actually at the Kerma meeting when I got a text from a resident, and I stepped out and called Andrew, and he wasn't on duty, but he had already had the patrol trooper and a deep officer in the area, and they were searching for the animal. Obviously, they didn't find it until a few hours later, but he was very proactive. I spoke with Torrington Area Health Department, and made them aware. They hadn't had any contact with the people who were bitten, because those calls didn't come in through the normal way that they call, and it's up to the people to call, but it is a reportable disease. So that was figured out, and Torrington Area Health was able to follow up with all the people who were bitten, and it did come back from the lab that it was rabid, and they turned it around in like one day, I think, which was pretty fast for them. Coronavirus is something that's obviously everybody has been hearing about. Hopefully everyone has been hearing about. I've been in contact with all 4 schools. They have their plans, and they're looking at their plans and activating their plans. There's concern for the private schools specifically, because they do have students that are coming from that live in Asia, and so some of the schools have already changed where they're not going to be sending kids home. They're going to be keeping them in the country. And again, just the 2020 legislative session is hopping along, and the pedestrian, I'm sort of calling it a pedestrian safety strategic plan. So from our pulling the barrels at the crosswalk, I've had a lot of conversations with the DOT, and Andrew and Rick have been fantastic, and Joyce have all been fantastic. We've talked about and figured out where we're going to reposition all of the signs. Turns out that those speed signs that we purchased however many years ago, the technology that's in them is pretty cumbersome. You have to actually physically be at the sign and be connecting over a local Bluetooth.
Laptop standing there.
Yeah, and so if you have one in the hollow or up on halfway to Skip Mountain, as we do, there's no cell service out there. So Joyce did a bunch of research and called the company, and so they're going to get retrofitted, and there's a rebate. So they will be better, more useful. My whole purpose is if we have the signs and they're collecting data, we should be getting that data and.
I think that was the intent, but
Right.
they were purchased at Andrew Cog back then.
Right.
It was a deal.
Right. So we're fixing that. They're going to get moved to a different location. We're going to have. It's going to be for a specific amount of time so that we can, collect the data and put it into a publicly consumable format. So we can learn from the data. We're also talking to the DOT about getting.
Can we just jump back a little bit on that? So when you're moving them, do we know when, where, and how?
We're gonna, yes, it's all
Have
gonna
that
be scheduled.
Then
Yep.
we'll know
Yep.
about it. That'd be great. Thank you.
We're also talking to the DOT about, we're gonna have to get an encroachment permit. You can't park within 25 feet of either side of a crosswalk, but only one of the crosswalks has the striping. So we have to get a permit in order to do the striping. The state doesn't do, DOT Concom doesn't do the striping anymore. That's what we were told so far. I'm just the messenger here. So more conversations to come, but those are gonna get, they're gonna get that striping put on them. I am gonna take some photographs and send to the DOT the actual crosswalks, because I think a couple of them need to be repainted, and so I'm gonna push for them to repaint them, because if there's, we get desensitized to these things and they fade, and nobody pays attention. The other piece is there's gonna be education about this and additional, enforcement, and it's all gonna be timed. It's not, we're not gonna just randomly start it. There's gonna be public education, and we'll, communicate to Lynn when we plan to start, sort of put this plan into action. But I gotta get there's a lot of moving parts, and I gotta get all the moving parts into one place, and one of those big moving parts is working with Condot, so.
So this is a direct result of pulling those, identifying that they were a problem and a liability. And then there will be a further, as we talked about, steps, so that we can educate people as to what and how.
Yeah.
Great.
And there's a bunch of
Very
different
good,
programs
very
and,
good.
And there are regulations that says where the town doesn't have to put stop bars before the crosswalks and stuff. And they do not have to enforce the 25 feet if they don't wish to.
The town doesn't? Okay.
So, and that should be on a regular schedule, the crosswalk painting, but I'll call the person in charge of that, I see him all the time, just for the heck of it, see if it's actually on a schedule or not to be done.
where is it, in Watertown? Is that the one?
You have to go through Thomaston.
That's who I'm talking.
But it's in
that's what I'm
Torrington,
talking.
Signs and Markings is in charge of it out of the Torrington office.
Okay. I think I was given the name of the guy in Thomaston.
Yeah, you're probably given, that's where they give you all the number for the Thomaston, and then he calls Signs and Markings in Torrington.
So that's sort of where the, that project is. That's in my report.
Excellent. And you also, part of that, I heard you went to the chamber as well, right?
Yes.
You talked to them about this,
About which this?
about this plan of.
The crosswalk?
The crosswalk.
Have not yet, not talked about that yet.
Okay, because I think it would be good just to get them on board, because there'll be some flack for taking away parking spaces, if indeed, but if it's based on safety, it's better to have a bright
And
consumer.
we're not taking away, those parking spaces were never made, if it's illegal to park.
However you want to say it, however you want to say it. Great, thank you.
Report of the selectmen, do you all have any?
I only have requests that items that have come up in special meetings, or even like this as an example, that it gets on our old business. And it just keeps it point in mind. So as an example, we took away, and the direction was to do what you just did. I'd like to have that carry on the agenda until we finish that plan and that's
Okay.
off. I think that's good. We're in budget season, it should be on here, just in
Yep.
case something comes up and we need to talk about it.
Yep.
One case is Barbara's extra time kind of thing with this grant. And then the only other thing I was gonna say is the fire department also, no, that was it.
The only thing I have is that there's lots of information on FirstNet on the internet and stuff.
FirstNet.
And so I've been doing a lot of work. It all started back in 2012, all this stuff. So
Makes sense.
if you want to look it up and start.
It's actually a result of 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So, and the other concern I have is I'm starting to get contacted by some of the individuals, and I need to talk to someone about
Individuals.
that are, it sounds like there's two committees, Richards Road Committee and Rick Jennings Road, and I just want to know.
Civic action committees?
Yeah, sort of, but people starting to send me individual questions, and I want to know how the committee feels, how we should be responding to these people as individuals, or actually when they ask us as selectmen. I don't think I should be, is that correct?
You could say just, which I have done, is say, well, you need to bring it up to the selectmen, you need to come to the meeting, you need to do this.
Okay. I mean, that's why I'm here asking as the group, because.
Yeah, and as we've gotten questions in, they've all been like that whole big bolus of questions that came from the initial, those were all part of the record.
Well,
part of
the hard
minutes.
part is I'm starting to get, as the chief of the fire department, what kind of antennas could host FirstNet and not other, you know, like
So-
AT&T cell tower type, what other antennas?
But if they're asking you as
The
the
fire chief, that's
add
why I'm
on
asking.
your fire chief's email.
Correct, so that's why I'm
That's a-
asking the three of you.
Fire department question.
Fire department one. They asked me
They're
that
asking-
specifically,
That's
and
why-
I said, talk to the fire department.
Right, okay, that's why I'm asking you two if you don't have a problem with that.
That's under your,
Right,
Okay,
it's
no,
your-
I know, I'm just letting you know
If
that.
it's coming in through the, you know, somebody's asking you as a selectman.
Right, no,
Board of
right.
Selectmen, it
Right.
should come to the.
I mean, not that I wanna get involved with telling them what kind of a pole a FirstNet antenna can go up to, cause right now I don't have the answer. But I just wanna let you two both be aware that I am getting questions as the fire chief now, and a member of the fire department, so.
it's no.
No, I know, I'm just letting you know ahead of time.
Report of the treasurer.
I'm just gonna give you a written report. You can read it at your leisure. Anybody else? How exciting.
Is there anything more to remark or highlight, or?
Just, what's the acronym for UCOA, what is that?
Uniform Chart of Accounts. That's something that OPM instituted because they didn't want to read our audits. They wanted it submitted to them in a format that they could make it easier for them.
Mm-hmm. Revenue is strong, that's good, it's the season.
Oh, and, there were the 2 or 3 grant, possibilities that I shared with Barbara, and so we're looking into those, so on a constant hunt for more grants.
And actually, to address one of your questions about whether the certification is applicable to other grants, at the seminar that I was at, the particular grant that the affordable housing is applying for is not restricted just for housing, and there's actually money for infrastructure and other things.
Right.
So I could actually utilize that certification and apply for lighting for the parking lot, or
No, good. Okay.
lighting for the street grant.
So you could do more? Okay, good.
We've not received the first set for town meeting, but we are anticipating it.
Yeah, I mean, normally we get it in August.
Yeah.
And they haven't, it's bonded money, so they haven't approved the bond, or maybe they just approved it, the bonding for Town Aid Road. They haven't released the money yet, I know that.
Yeah, I think it was in the last couple of weeks.
I think so. Maybe it's just recent. So we should be getting it.
Do you have to make a motion to accept this, or do we just accept that?
Just because
Just
it's
accept it.
already-
All right.
Thanks, Barbara. The last item is so we'll do the tax refunds first. So we have, Debbie, as you can see, it's in here, we have 2, property tax refunds that we have to.
I believe they're automobile, I don't think they're property tax.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, they're automobile. And we have to make a motion. Right? That would be the, yes, so we have to make a motion. One is, from the Hyundai Leasing something trust, I don't know what that word is. And it is for $236.26. And it was.
It's pretty known.
That's, yeah,
Right,
those are
yeah,
the
it's sort
normal
of
lease
housekeeping
leasing
stuff.
stuff.
So I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
We need to sign it, right?
do both at one time?
Yeah, I can see why, well, no, we'll do them one at a time.
Okay, so the Hyundai one, Hyundai lease is first. Any other questions?
A second, who did you?
You looked like you were gonna have a question. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Second one is for, Jonathan Beckerman for $55.34.
That's the same, another company, automobile.
Yes.
Yep.
It's not an
So-
automobile lease, but it's for, personal property. Refund of access payments.
Oh, I'll make that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second.
I did second.
Oh, good, okay. Aye. Sorry.
Just in terms of protocol, have we not in the past just done them in a lump? So we can review them and then just lump them all together.
Okay.
If there's something of note that's huge, you can jump right.
Okay.
Do you need someone else to sign it?
No, just Jean signs it, yeah.
Thanks.
And the final item is the additions to approved vendor list for fiscal year 2000.
No, that's a leftover, that's.
No.
Oh, that's a
right
leftover.
here. We're done.
Okay, so we are adjourned at 2027. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.